I never believed in second chances. At least, not until I opened my eyes and realized I was alive again, reborn, 2 years before everything in my life collapsed. Rachel Lynn, my husband's so-called white moonlight, was standing at my front door, 8 months pregnant, tears running down her face like she was the victim of some grand injustice. Behind her stood Ethan, my husband, and his mother, Sherry, their faces twisted with guilt and disgust. I remembered this moment vividly. It was the day my world began to unravel in my last life. Lisa, Rachel sobbed, clutching her belly as if the child inside might fall out at any moment. Please, spare me and my baby. I have nowhere else to go. She reached out and scraped my hand as if by accident. The sting pulled me out of my daze. I touched my neck. No blood, no bruises, no stab wounds. I was really back. And this time, I wasn't going to play the fool. In my previous life, I hesitated. I held on to Ethan like a fool, even after he brought Rachel into our home, even after the betrayal burned through every cell in my body. I was pregnant then too. Just found out. I was going to tell him that day, before Rachel's grand performance, but none of that mattered now. Because this time, I was prepared. This time, I wouldn't stay silent. I took a deep breath, looked Rachel straight in the eyes, and said, "Get out." Her eyes widened in shock. She wasn't expecting resistance. "What?" She blinked. "You can't be serious. I'm carrying Ethan's child, then go live with Ethan. You're not stepping foot into my house." Sherry gasped like I'd slapped her. "You heartless woman. How dare you speak to her like that? You were never good enough for Ethan. Rachel should have been my daughter-in-law from the start." I smiled, cold and calm. "Funny, you never said that when I paid off Ethan's student loans or worked 2 jobs while we started the company." I could feel their stares turning into something else, confusion, fear. "Good, let them feel it. I want a divorce," I said. The words dropped like a bomb. Ethan blinked. Sherry nearly stumbled. Rachel froze, her mouth opening and closing without sound. In my past life, they had to drag that agreement out of me with lies and manipulation. But this time, I would beat them to it. "You're joking," Ethan said, his voice tight. "No. And if you're smart, you'll sign before I change my mind and decide to take half the company with me." He didn't know how to respond. He looked to his mother. She looked to Rachel. And Rachel, poor, sweet, manipulative Rachel, started crying harder. "Please don't do this," she sobbed. "This is all a misunderstanding. I didn't mean to come between you. You did, and you succeeded. But you won't ruin me twice. Get out, all of you." When they didn't move, I walked straight to the drawer, pulled out the divorce papers Ethan had hidden for manipulation later, and signed them with a firm, elegant stroke. "Lisa," Ethan whispered, like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. "Don't worry," I said. "You'll be free to be with the woman you always wanted. But this child?" I reached into my purse and pulled out the prenatal report. "This child has no father now, and no need for one." For a moment, just a moment, I saw a flicker of panic in Ethan's eyes, but it disappeared quickly. He still thought I was bluffing. He didn't know that this time, I'd already made up my mind. They finally left, and when the door shut behind them, I leaned against it, letting the silence sink in. I was free, but freedom doesn't come cheap. I was still pregnant, and I absolutely knew I couldn't keep this baby. Not again. Not when it would tie me to a man who had once stood by while I was murdered in cold blood. I had been naive before, thinking love meant sacrifice. That if I stayed, if I tried hard enough, Ethan would come back to me. That Rachel was just a phase. But Rachel was never a phase. She was a plan, a replacement. This time, I would not mourn. I would build. I would protect myself. I would rise. And they would burn in the ruins they created. The morning after the divorce, I didn't cry. I didn't scream or curl up in bed with regret. I woke up at dawn, brewed myself a hot cup of coffee, and sat by the window, watching the sun rise over the city skyline. The light seemed brighter, the air clearer. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. I wasn't a wife anymore. I wasn't a daughter-in-law. I wasn't a backup plan. I was just me. I opened my notebook and wrote 3 words on a blank page. Cut, burn, rebuild. That was my new mantra. Before noon, I had already called the bank and closed all joint accounts. I sold the house Ethan and I had shared too many memories in those walls, most of them bitter. Every corner whispered betrayal. I needed a fresh start, I signed the papers without flinching. A part of me had once believed I could save my marriage. That if I gave more, loved harder, endured longer, Ethan would see me, choose me, protect me. But he never did, and I finally understood why. He never loved me. Not really. I was just convenient, loyal, familiar. But Rachel, she was the fantasy he clung to. The what if he couldn't let go. In my past life, I tried to compete with that. This time, I wouldn't bother. I moved into a small apartment near the business district, nothing fancy, but it was mine. No one else's name on the lease. No one else's opinion to consider. I could finally sleep without checking the clock to see when Ethan would come home. No more waiting. No more guessing. That freedom, it was addicting. But there was one thing I still had to do. Something that had been hanging over me like a shadow. I was still pregnant. In my last life, that child had been my only source of light. I held on, even when everything else slipped away. I remember clutching my belly, whispering promises to a baby who never made it to this world. And when I lost that child, when Ethan smiled at the news, calling it karma, I felt like my soul had been carved out of my body. This time, I had the power to choose. I sat in the doctor's office, silent, numb, the fluorescent lights above, buzzing like insects. I held the prenatal report in my hands, perfectly healthy, just over 7 weeks. But I couldn't keep it. Not when I knew how this story ended. Not when that child would be used against me, manipulated, resented, abandoned, just like I had been. So I signed the papers. The nurse was gentle, the doctor kind. Still, when it was over, I lay in that recovery bed and stared at the ceiling, feeling both broken and whole at the same time. It was the hardest decision I'd ever made, but it was mine. I mourned briefly, and then I moved forward. A week later, I was already planning my next steps. I knew how Ethan's company worked. Hell, I had built half of it. The logistics contracts, the warehouse deals, the supplier relationships, I had managed them all. I knew the industry better than he ever would. And clients trusted me. So I started making calls. Lisa, you're starting your own firm? Say less. I'm in. One by one, our old clients jumped ship. Not because I begged, but because they saw the truth. I was the one who delivered results. Ethan just took the credit. It didn't take long before I registered a new business, rented a modest office space, and hired 2 of our former staff who had left after watching Ethan cozy up to Rachel. Loyalty didn't come cheap in business, and I knew how to earn it. Meanwhile, Ethan was busy playing house. He and Rachel posted pictures online, cozy dinners, ultrasound images, smiling selfies. It was all so perfectly curated, like they were trying to convince the world they were in love, maybe even trying to convince themselves. What they didn't post, that Ethan had mortgaged the company the moment he got full control, that he used the loan money to pay off Rachel's ex-husband's gambling debts, that his staff turnover rate had doubled. They thought they won, but they had no idea what was coming. One morning, I walked into my office and found a large flower bouquet waiting for me on the desk. White lilies and blue hydrangeas. No note, but I knew who sent them. I recognized the florist. It was the same one Ethan used to order from every year on our anniversary. The scent made my stomach turn. I threw the bouquet in the trash and sent a clear message. The past is dead. Stop trying to dig it back up. Later, that day, I ran into Sherry, my former mother-in-law, at a networking event. She looked thinner, tired, her face drawn and hollow, but her voice was still sharp. I heard you're doing quite well for yourself, she said, forcing a smile. I sipped my champagne calmly. I am. Thanks for asking. I suppose I misjudged you. No, I replied coolly. You judged me exactly how you wanted to. You just didn't expect me to survive it. Her eyes narrowed, but she said nothing. I smiled. By the way, how's the grandchild? Her lips twitched. She didn't answer. So the truth was beginning to crack. I left her standing there, blinking in confusion. I had no desire to rehash old battles. I had new victories to pursue. This time, I wasn't just surviving. I was thriving. And as the pieces began to fall into place, I knew one thing for sure. My story wasn't over. It was just beginning. 3 weeks after launching my new company, we landed our first major deal. It was poetic, really. The client used to be Ethan's biggest account. In my past life, I spent months building trust with their manager, resolving a dozen headaches on tight deadlines. Ethan had always brushed it off like it was nothing because to him, my work was invisible. Now, that same client walked into my new office, shook my hand, and said, "Lisa, we've been waiting for you to leave him. Glad you finally did." That moment stuck with me, not just because of the deal, but because of what it meant. I wasn't just reclaiming my career, I was reclaiming my identity. Ethan's name had been on the paperwork, but I had been the one doing the heavy lifting. Now, with my name on the company, every win was mine. But of course, good news travels fast. And so does jealousy. It wasn't long before Ethan came knocking. Literally. I was in the middle of reviewing contracts when my assistant buzzed me. "Lisa, there's a Mr. Chen asking to see you. He's not on the calendar." My stomach twisted at the sound of his name, but I stayed calm. "Tell him I'm busy. He says it's urgent, that it's about Rachel." That got my attention. Against my better judgment, I told her to send him in. He walked in like a ghost of himself, creased shirt, dark circles under his eyes, hair unruly. The arrogant sparkle in his eyes was gone. He didn't sit. "I know you hate me," he started, voice gravelly. "I deserve that, but I need to warn you. Rachel's not who you think she is." I stared at him, unimpressed. "You think I didn't already know that? You think I didn't learn that the hard way?" His lips parted, then closed. He didn't expect me to be this composed. "I think she's cheating," he admitted, "with Robert, her ex-husband." My silence was answer enough. His jaw tightened. "She told me she was over him, that she only married him because her mother arranged it, that she was escaping abuse. She also told you I was cruel, that I pushed her down the stairs." I snapped. "And you believed her?" "Without question." He flinched. That shut him up. I stood. "Ethan, let me be clear. I don't care who Rachel sleeps with. I don't care what she does to you. You chose her, and you chose to throw me away like I meant nothing. So don't come here looking for sympathy." He looked desperate now. "You don't understand. She's dangerous. She's using my money to pay off Robert's debts. I think they're planning something." "Like what?" I cut him off. "Another fake pregnancy? Another staged tragedy? Another excuse for you to ruin someone else's life?" His face crumbled. "You didn't care when it was my life," I said coldly. "So why should I care now that it's yours?" I walked to the door and opened it. "Don't come here again. We're not allies. We're not even acquaintances. We're done." He stood there for a moment longer, then turned and walked out without another word. I shut the door and leaned against it, my heart pounding. For a moment, just a moment, the past threatened to creep back in. The image of his bloodied hands, the memory of his voice whispering, "You." Oh, Rachel alive. I closed my eyes, breathing deeply. That Lisa was gone. She had died, literally. This one? She was made of iron. The next day, gossip started flying. Rumors that Rachel had been spotted in a hotel with Robert, that Ethan's company was bleeding money, that clients were pulling out, that the bank was knocking. And then came the best. One of all, Ethan and Rachel's marriage license had been revoked. Apparently, it was never properly filed. She'd kept her legal name. Smart, very smart, because when she disappeared 3 days later along with a chunk of Ethan's company funds, there wasn't a thing he could do about it. Oh, and she didn't go alone. Summer Lynn, his new secretary, vanished at the same time. 2 women, 1 man, one heaping pile of karma. The news spread like wildfire. I didn't gloat publicly, but I did pop a bottle of champagne with my team the night our rival firm's fall hit the headlines. Privately, I savored every second, because poetic justice tastes best when it's slow sipped. Ethan's calls came next. I blocked them all. Then his emails, marked as spam. Then he showed up at my office again, this time with roses. Red ones just like the ones he used to give me before. The lies began. My receptionist stopped him at the door. "She's in a meeting," she told him sweetly. "All week, with people who respect her." He left the flowers. I tossed them out the back. And then came Sherry, the mighty matriarch, reduced to whispers and apologies. She showed up at my office pretending to be warm and maternal, holding a gift basket filled with vitamins and herbal soups. "For your health," she said. "You're still young. You can still have a child. Start over." With Ethan, I raised my hand to cut her off. "You think I'd go back to the man who let your favorite almost daughter-in-law kill me?" She paled. "I'm not interested in rebuilding what I barely survived. Go home, Sherry. Or better yet, go raise the grandson you were so desperate for." Her lips trembled. "That boy, he wasn't Ethan's. He never was." I know, I said simply. But you didn't care when it mattered. She left without another word. The past was crumbling. I could feel it. Piece by piece, the people who once destroyed me were now destroying themselves, and all I had to do was keep walking. By the end of the month, my company was thriving. We had doubled our client list. My name was being whispered in industry circles not as Ethan's ex-wife, but as a rising star, the woman who built an empire out of betrayal. And I wore that title proudly. Success, I discovered, was the best revenge. Not spite, not screaming, just results. But fate wasn't done with its cruel sense of humor. It happened on a crisp Monday morning. I was walking out of a client's building when I saw a familiar figure across the street. He looked lost, a worn-out suit, hands trembling as he clutched a piece of paper. His eyes scanned every passing car like he was looking for something or someone. Ethan? I stopped in my tracks, his eyes locked with mine. His face twisted in a mix of desperation and relief, like seeing me was the only light left in his dark little world. He stumbled toward me, crossing the street without even checking traffic. I didn't move. I just watched. Lisa, he panted, stopping inches away. Please, just hear me out. I folded my arms. You have 30 seconds. He looked around as if afraid someone would overhear. Then, he shoved the paper into my hands. It was a bank notice. Loan default. Final deadline. They're seizing the company tomorrow, he said. Everything's gone. Rachel. She cleared the accounts. Summer helped her. They forged my signature. I read the document carefully, then handed it back. Sorry, I said. But that sounds like a you problem. His voice cracked. You don't understand. Without the company, I have nothing. No money, no investors, no family, I interrupted. Because you traded that in a long time ago. He dropped to his knees, right there, on the sidewalk, in front of traffic and strangers. Ethan Chen, once so proud, once so arrogant, knelt before me. I was wrong. About everything. About Rachel. About you. I see it now. You were the one who built the company. You were the one who stayed. I didn't appreciate you. I destroyed you. I regret it, Lisa. I do. I stared down at him, my face blank. You regret it now because your life is crumbling, I said. But where was this regret when Rachel lied? When you watched me bleed? When you stood over me and said I owed her a life? His eyes filled with tears. Please, I'm begging you, help me save the company. You're the only one who can. You're the only one who ever believed in me. That made me laugh, sharp, bitter, almost cruel. No, Ethan, I said. I didn't believe in you. I believed in who I thought you could be. That was my mistake. I turned and walked away. He didn't follow. That night, I received a call from one of the original investors. He was interested in purchasing Ethan's failing company through auction. I don't want to run it, he said, but I'd happily back you if you want it. It was a tempting offer. I hadn't planned on acquiring Ethan's firm, but the opportunity was too perfect to pass up. Poetic justice, once again, placed itself at my feet. We bought it for half its value. The next morning, I walked into the building I once helped build. The employees stared, shocked, whispering. They had all seen the news. Some clapped quietly. A few smiled. And when I walked into Ethan's old office, the silence was deafening. It still smelled like his cologne, like the past, like pain. I opened the windows, let in the light, and exhaled. It was mine now. A week passed. The press was all over the story. Betrayed wife turned CEO. Chen Corporation saved by ex-wife. Rachel Lynn and secretary vanish with millions. I didn't care about headlines. I cared about peace, but peace didn't last. I was called to the police station unexpectedly. One morning, they said they needed me to identify a body. My heart pounded. I wasn't sure who I was expecting. Maybe Robert? Maybe even Summer? But when they pulled back the sheet, I staggered. It was Ethan. His face was unrecognizable, stab wounds covered. His throat had been slashed so deeply it was nearly severed. The brutality made my stomach twist. The officer looked grim. Summerlin's brother, the one with the unstable mental history. He thought Ethan knew where she ran off to. When Ethan couldn't tell him. This happened. I felt nothing. Not numbness. Not grief. Just nothing. A part of me thought I'd cry, that I'd mourn the man I once loved. But that man had died long ago on the night he chose to let someone else destroy me. This was just consequence. Karma, delayed but precise, the officer cleared his throat. You're listed as next of kin. His mother's unresponsive. We need someone to arrange the identification. She's in a wheelchair, isn't she? I asked quietly. He nodded, paralyzed. A fall a few months back. She hasn't spoken since, of course. Rachel's final gift to the Chen family. I signed the papers without hesitation. On my way out, I passed Sherry. She sat in the waiting area, her eyes empty, face slack, her hand trembling as it clutched a picture of Ethan. She looked up at me and something flickered in her expression, recognition, sorrow, maybe even an apology. But I had no more space in my heart for her, just as she had once shown me none. I walked past without a word. That night, I stood on the balcony of my apartment, looking out at the skyline. I was alone, but I wasn't lonely. My phone buzzed. A message from Alex Shu, my silent partner and the man who had believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. You okay? I typed back. Yeah, just watching the city burn down all the bridges I never needed. After Ethan's death, the city was buzzing. Headlines painted him as a tragic figure, businessman brutally murdered and love triangle gone wrong. But I knew better. He wasn't a victim of love. He was a victim of his own choices, and I wasn't about to waste a second mourning him. With the acquisition of his company complete, I merged the best of both businesses under a new name, Phoenix Line Logistics. Fitting, I thought, born from ashes, rebuilt with fire. Clients came in waves, some curious, others wary. But one by one, they stayed. And just like that, I rose. But success didn't mean peace. Not yet. It started with whispers. Rumors of Rachel being seen in border cities. Then came word from one of our old suppliers. Robert had been caught trying to pawn fake documents. His gambling debts had doubled. And Rachel, missing in action. I didn't care to chase them down. Let them rot in exile. But there was something that stayed with me, Summer. Her betrayal had been silent, but sharp. She was a stranger in my past life, a knife in the shadows. And now she had vanished without a trace, leaving destruction in her wake. I kept my guard up, had security installed at the office and my apartment. I wasn't going to die again, not for anyone. Then, one day, as I walked out of a meeting, I saw Alex waiting for me near the elevator. Got a minute? He asked. I nodded. He followed me to my office. We sat. For a moment, he said nothing. Then, he slid a thin file across the table. What's this? Investigation report. I've been quietly keeping tabs on Robert, Rachel, and Summer just in case. This came in today. I opened the file. 2 passport photos. One of Rachel, the other of Summer. Fake names, fake IDs, illegal entry stamps, a note at the bottom. Believed to be in hiding in Southeast Asia. Cited with child. My heart stopped. Child? What? Child? I asked. Voice sharp. Alex shrugged. Could be Rachel's. Could be faked. Could be a leverage ploy. But there's more. He pulled out another photo. It was Sherry, but not the proud, cruel woman I remembered. This Sherry was frail. Half her face drooping from the stroke. Her body slumped in a wheelchair. Next to her sat a lawyer. Documents in hand. Rachel forced Sherry to sign over her assets before fleeing, Alex said. Everything, including the old family home. I stared at the image. So that was her final betrayal, robbing the only woman who ever backed her unconditionally. It would have been poetic if it wasn't so pitiful. She lost everything, Alex said quietly. I looked up. So did I. He met my eyes. Yeah, but you rebuilt it. We sat in silence for a moment, the tension melting into something softer, something more personal. Alex had been a steady presence since the beginning. He didn't coddle. He didn't pity. He just believed in my vision, in my strength. And slowly, in the quiet moments between deals and late-night strategy calls, he started believing in me. Lisa, he said, more carefully now, you don't have to keep fighting alone. My breath caught. That vulnerability, the kind I hadn't allowed myself in months, rose to the surface like a bruise I'd been ignoring. I looked at him, really looked. Sharp suit, steady hands, kind eyes. There was no trace of Ethan's ego, or Robert's sleaze, or the kind of hunger Rachel wore like perfume. Just a man who saw me, not what I could give, but who I was. I wanted to speak, but all I could manage was a nod, and he understood. He didn't push. He simply stood, straightened his jacket, and said, "Let me know when you're ready." When the door closed behind him, I exhaled. Maybe, in time, I could love again. But for now, I had work to do. 3 weeks later, I received a call from the police. Another arrest. A major trafficking ring had been busted at the border. Among the rescued victims were two women, one surnamed Lynn, the other, she, Rachel and Summer. It was almost a perfect. I was asked to come to the station for a statement. Apparently, some of the forged documents were in Ethan's name. The investigation was ongoing. When I arrived, they were being processed in a side room. Through the glass, I saw Rachel, hair a mess, clothes tattered, clutching her child like a shield. Summer sat beside her, eyes vacant. Rachel looked up and saw me. She froze. The look on her face, shame, fury, disbelief, was everything I had waited to see. She stood abruptly, mouth opening, likely to scream some fresh lie. But I didn't give her the chance. I turned, signed the required paperwork, and left. She wasn't worth a single word. Not anymore. That night, I stood on the rooftop of my building. City lights sparkled like stars fallen to earth. Behind me, my office windows glowed with quiet life, my team still wrapping up late projects, laughter echoing faintly from the kitchen. This was the world I had built. Alone, scarred but standing. My phone buzzed. It was Alex. Dinner tomorrow? I typed back. Only if you let me pay this time. Deal. I smiled. Let Rachel chase ghosts. Let Ethan rot in a file buried in a cabinet. Let Sherry stare at faded photos, aching with regret. As for me, I had a life to live, and I wasn't wasting a single second of it. After Ethan's death, the city buzzed with gossip. Headlines painted him as a tragic figure, businessman brutally murdered and love triangle gone wrong. But I knew better. He wasn't a victim of love. He was a victim of his own choices. And I wasn't about to waste another second mourning him. With the acquisition of his company finalized, I merged the best of both businesses under a new name, Phoenix Line Logistics. Fitting, I thought. Born from ashes, rebuilt with fire. Clients came in waves, some out of curiosity, others hesitantly. But one by one, they stayed. And just like that, I rose. But success never guaranteed peace. It started with whispers, rumors of Rachel being seen in border towns. Then came word from an old supplier Robert had tried to pawn off fake documents. His gambling debts had doubled. Rachel, missing. I didn't care to chase them. Let them rot wherever they were hiding. But one name still haunted me, Summer. Her betrayal had been silent and sharp. In my past life, she was just a shadow. But now her impact had left real wounds. I had no interest in revenge, but I had no intention of letting my guard down either. One morning, as I walked out of a meeting, I found Alex waiting near the elevator. Got a minute? He asked. We returned to my office, where he slid a slim file across my desk. I've been keeping tabs quietly on Robert, Rachel, and Summer, he said. This came in today. Inside were passport photos. Rachel and Summer, under fake names, stamped with illegal entry visas. A final note at the bottom read, believed to be in hiding in Southeast Asia, cited with child. My breath hitched. A child? What child? I asked sharply. Alex shrugged. Could be hers, could be fake, could be leverage. But there's more. He produced another photo. Sherry, but not the woman I remembered. This Sherry was frail, half her face paralyzed from a stroke. Slumped in a wheelchair beside a lawyer. Rachel forced her to sign over everything. The house, assets. Her name's been wiped off the property registry. I stared at the image for a long time. So that was Rachel's final betrayal, stealing everything from the woman who defended her without question. It should have felt poetic, but mostly it just felt pathetic. She lost everything, Alex said quietly. So did I replied. He looked at me, his voice gentler now. Yeah, but you rebuilt it. There was a pause. He leaned forward slightly, voice lower, steadier. Lisa, you don't have to keep fighting alone. I felt it then, that ache in my chest I'd buried beneath steel and success. I looked at Alex, really looked. The steady eyes, the quiet faith. The man who saw me, not what I'd been through, not what I could give him, just me. I wanted to say something, anything, but my throat tightened. I nodded instead. He understood. He always did. As he stood and left, he said, let me know when you're ready. That night, I stared at the city from my balcony. Maybe, one day, I could love again. But for now, I had work to do. 3 weeks later, the call came from the police. A major trafficking ring had been busted. Two of the rescued victims, one surnamed Lynn, the other she, Rachel and Summer, they had been found hiding with fake documents. And a young child. I was asked to provide a statement. Some of the forged paperwork had Ethan's name on it. They needed help untangling the web. At the station, I saw them through the glass. Rachel looked haggard, clutching her child like a prop. Summer sat beside her, cold and emotionless. When Rachel noticed me, she jumped to her feet, her face twisted in panic, maybe shame, maybe desperation. She opened her mouth, probably to spit some excuse, some new lie. But I didn't care. I turned my back and left without a word. That silence would sting more than anything I could say. That night, I stood on the rooftop of my office building, watching the city burn gold with light. Behind me, laughter echoed from my staff as they wrapped up a long workday. My phone buzzed. A message from Alex. "Dinner tomorrow?" I typed back, "Only if you let me pay this time." His reply was immediate. "Deal." I smiled. Let Rachel rot in a cell. Let Ethan's memory decay under dust. Let Sherry sit in silence, clinging to faded photos of a son she once chose over me. As for me, I was alive, I was whole, and I was just getting started. The following months passed quickly, almost too quickly. My days were packed with meetings, expansion plans, and contract negotiations. At night, I still found moments to pause on the balcony, over tea, sometimes with a glass of wine, and think about everything that had happened. It felt unreal, like I'd lived 3 different lives inside one. The frightened girl who loved blindly, the broken woman who died betrayed, and now, the reborn self-made CEO, resilient, calculating, unstoppable. Alex and I grew closer with every passing week. At first, our dinners were quiet, mostly business. But then came the gentle teasing, the late-night conversations about life, regret, and what we'd both lost to ambition and betrayal. He never pushed, never expected, just stayed close, steady, patient. I admired that more than I let on. One night, as we wrapped up a business pitch with potential investors, one of them asked, "Are you two a couple?" The room went silent. I glanced at Alex. He smirked slightly but didn't speak. I answered, with the truth, "Not yet." The investor laughed, raised his glass, and said, "Then I hope I get invited to the wedding when you finally come to your senses." It was a moment, lighthearted, but real. I didn't flinch. I didn't retreat into old fears. I smiled and let myself enjoy it. But even as I rebuilt, the ghosts of my past life never disappeared entirely. One rainy evening, while reviewing documents, I received an anonymous email. No subject, just a single attachment, a blurry photo. Rachel and Robert, in what looked like a dingy motel room, surrounded by suitcases. In the background, barely visible, was Sherry's wheelchair. My stomach dropped. The message that followed was simple. They're back. For a long moment, I just sat there, staring at the screen. They had returned. I didn't know how or why, but I had a feeling it wasn't to apologize. I forwarded the email to Alex, followed by a single line, "We need to talk." The next morning, we met early at the office. "It's not just money they're after anymore," Alex said as he read through the message. "They must be desperate." He leaned back in his chair. "Sherry's condition hasn't improved. She's likely being used again." "And the child?" I asked. "Still with them?" He nodded. "From what we can gather, yes. But he's not Ethan's, remember. Legally, they have no claim to anything here. Unless," I said slowly, "they try to blackmail someone." Alex's expression darkened. "You think they'll come for you?" "Not directly," I said, "but they might try to use the press or the sympathy card. Rachel knows how to cry on cue. All she needs is the right stage." We prepared quietly. Our legal team was briefed. Security was increased. And I made sure all our company assets were airtight. Then, 2 days later, it happened. A message was sent to multiple news outlets, an anonymous tip accusing me of laundering money from Ethan's company through Shell Investments. They used old photos, twisted timelines, and fake bank records. The goal was clear: smear my name, destroy my credibility, and maybe, just maybe, reclaim a sliver of relevance. But they'd underestimated me again. I held a press conference that same day, calm, collected. I brought receipts, every contract, every cleared audit, every independent investor testimonial. By the end, the reporters weren't asking me questions. They were demanding to know who would go so far to fabricate such lies. That evening, I released a statement confirming that I had filed formal defamation charges, and to make sure the final nail hit just right, I posted a single photo on my social media account, me and Alex, walking out of City Hall after registering our joint business entity under both our names. The caption, "Truth needs no disguise." The post went viral within hours, but the real satisfaction came days later, when the police contacted me again. They had found Rachel and Robert hiding in an abandoned farmhouse on the outskirts of town. Sherry was with them, half-starved, barely conscious. The child was unharmed. They were arrested on multiple charges: fraud, forgery, abuse, and unlawful confinement. The press tried to contact me for comment. I declined every request. What was there to say? Justice speaks louder than I ever could. When I visited the hospital a week later to sign a statement, I walked past Sherry's room. She was awake, barely, her face pale and sunken. She tried to speak when she saw me, a sound escaping her throat like a breath too tired to form words. I stood there for a moment, not out of pity, not even out of anger, but closure. "You made your choice," I said softly. "And so did I." Then I turned and walked away. That night, Alex cooked dinner at my place: pasta, wine, soft jazz in the background. After we ate, he looked at me across the table and asked, "Do you ever regret it?" I thought for a moment. Regret what? Everything. The past, the choices, the pain. I swirled my wine, watching the reflections twist like memories. "I regret wasting so much of myself on people who never deserved it," I said. "But I don't regret coming through it. I'm stronger now, sharper, and freer." He smiled. "That's the best answer I've ever heard." Later, as we stood on the balcony watching the stars blink into view, he took my hand. "You know," he said, "you could have let it destroy you. But you didn't. You chose power. You chose truth. You chose you." I looked at him, really looked, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt peace. "I didn't just choose me," I said, voice steady. "I rebuilt me." The air had changed. It was subtle, but I felt it every time I stepped into my office, every time I caught my reflection walking past a glass wall, shoulders straighter, eyes clearer, no weight on my chest anymore. Phoenix Line Logistics had not only survived the smear campaign but thrived in the wake of it. New clients were approaching us, drawn in by the spectacle but staying because of results. We were efficient, reliable, and above all, we had a story people believed in. A woman betrayed, rising back from the ashes to take what was hers. Some called me an inspiration. Others called me lucky. I didn't care what name they used. They hadn't seen me bleeding out on the floor in my last life. Hadn't heard the soft, cold voice of a man I once trusted saying, "You owe Rachel a life." If they had, they'd know this wasn't luck. It was war, and I'd won. Alex and I grew closer with a kind of natural ease that I didn't know relationships could have. We didn't play games. We didn't talk in circles. He brought me coffee. On days I forgot breakfast, I edited his pitch decks late into the night. It was strange how normal it felt to have someone beside me who didn't expect me to shrink myself. One evening, while reviewing quarterly projections, he looked up and said, "You know, I've worked with dozens of people in my career, men, women, old money, new blood. But you scare them." I raised an eyebrow, half amused, half curious. "Scare who?" "Everyone who ever thought they could control you," he said. "You make them realize you were never meant to be caged." That stuck with me. But peace, no matter how hard won, never lasted long in my world. One morning, as I scrolled through a report, an alert flashed across my phone. An online blog had leaked the full police report on Rachel, Robert, and Summer. Not just their crimes, but their confessions. One line stood out like a knife to the ribs. "We were going to use the child to draw Lisa back. It was the only way to get to her." I set the phone down slowly, the words echoing louder than they had any right to. Use the child, as bait, as leverage, as if I hadn't already given up everything to protect my peace. That was who they were, and I knew it. But reading it in their own words lit a fire I hadn't felt in weeks. I called Alex. When he arrived, I handed him the phone. He read silently, jaw tightening. "They were never going to stop," he said. "Even prison isn't enough for people like them." "No," I said, "but silence is. The more I succeed, the more they vanish." I doubled down on work. We launched a new logistics software that disrupted half the local industry. A rival company tried to undercut our pricing model, and we bought them out within a month. Every boardroom I walked into now, I was greeted not with skepticism, but respect, but with success came reflection. One night, I stood in my old neighborhood, the one I had shared with Ethan, the one I had once called home. The building was run down now, the windows dark. A for sale sign hung crooked near the entrance. The air smelled of rust and regret. I walked up to the door, ran my fingers across the old brass number. I could still remember the exact spot where Rachel had once stood, 8 months pregnant, weeping on command. I remembered the way Sherry had shouted, how Ethan had looked at me with that cold, detached glare. I had been willing to fight for all of them once, but in the end, none had lifted a finger to fight for me. Now, they were all gone, and I was still standing. I walked away from that place without a single look back. In the months that followed, the court cases wrapped up. Rachel and Robert were sentenced. Summer's case was more complicated due to her brother's involvement, but she wasn't walking free either. Sherry was placed under supervised care, legally stripped of all decision-making rights. There was no legacy left of the Chen family, now just ashes. One afternoon, I received a handwritten letter in the mail. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting. Rachel. I opened it with detached curiosity. Inside, 3 short lines. I still don't understand how you beat us. You were supposed to break. You were supposed to lose, but you didn't. How? I smiled, not because it was funny, but because that was the difference between us. She played to destroy. I played to survive, and survivors always outlast those who feed on chaos. I didn't reply. Some questions deserve no answers. Life began to soften around the edges again. I started taking weekends off. I traveled for leisure, not business. I read books I never had time for, rediscovered music I'd forgotten I loved, and through it all, Alex remained. Quiet, steady, and undeniably present. One night, as we sat watching the city lights twinkle from the rooftop of his apartment, he turned to me and asked, "What do you want now? You've gotten your revenge. You've healed. What's next?" I thought about it. Not just the money, not the victories, not even the peace. I want to live, I said. For me, without looking over my shoulder, without proving anything to anyone. I want to feel love without fear, wake up without pain. I want a life that's mine, not a reaction to someone else's destruction. He reached for my hand, threading his fingers through mine. Then let's build it, he said, together. And for the first time since my rebirth, I said yes, not with caution, not with suspicion, but with hope. Real, quiet, hopeful yes. The day everything came full circle wasn't marked by any grand event, no flashing headlines or courtroom drama. It was quiet, a regular Tuesday. I was sitting in my office, watching the morning light filter through the windows, sipping tea, when my assistant walked in with a small, rectangular envelope. "This came for you," she said. "No sender listed." I turned it over in my hands. The paper was expensive, heavy. I opened it carefully. Inside was a single sheet of thick cream stationery and invitation. It was for an industry gala honoring influential leaders in logistics and trade. My name was printed on the front, bold and unmistakable. Lisa Zhang, founder and CEO, Phoenix Line Logistics. Below it was a line that caught me off guard. "You are being recognized for your outstanding contributions, resilience, and innovation." I sat with that for a long time. Not long ago, the same industry that now praised me had only known me as Ethan's wife. They hadn't seen my face in meetings. They hadn't remembered my name on contracts. But now, they remembered. And not because I clung to a man. Because I fought, built, and became impossible to ignore. At the gala, I wore a deep red gown. Color I once feared made me look too bold. That night, boldness was the point. When I walked in, people turned. Some whispered, others applauded. I walked through it all with a steady gaze and an easy smile. After I received the award, I gave a short speech. I didn't name names. I didn't mention betrayal or murder or secrets. Instead, I said this: we all build stories around the people we love. Sometimes those stories are beautiful lies, but the truth always catches up, and when it does, don't be afraid to start over. Because your worth doesn't vanish just because someone else fails to see it. It wasn't just a message to the crowd. It was for the old me, the one who stayed too long, hoped too much, and paid too dearly. Later that evening, I stood on the balcony overlooking the city, a familiar presence at my side. Alex handed me a flute of champagne, then wrapped an arm around my waist. "So," he murmured, How does it feel to be the woman everyone's finally paying attention to? I laughed softly, resting my head on his shoulder, like I don't need their attention anymore. And it was true. I didn't crave validation. I didn't need apologies. The scars I carried weren't badges of pain anymore, they were proof. Proof that I had lived, lost, and come back sharper than before. Over the next few months, life took on a new rhythm. The company expanded internationally. We opened branches into more cities. Our team doubled in size. I started mentoring young women entering the industry, teaching them the things no one had taught me: how to negotiate, how to lead without apology, how to walk away when staying breaks you, and love. It came quietly, securely. Alex never once tried to outshine me. He celebrated every win like it was his own. We weren't each other's missing halves, we were two whole people choosing to stand side by side. On the anniversary of my rebirth, I visited the cemetery. Not for Ethan, not even for the unborn child I once lost, but for the version of me that died that night in the kitchen, staring into the eyes of the man she loved as the life drained from her body. I placed a white lily on the grass and whispered, "You didn't die for nothing." Then I turned away from the grave and walked into the light, where I belonged. Weeks later, news broke that Robert Lynn had been found dead in a casino overseas, stabbed during a fight over a debt he couldn't pay. There was no ceremony. No family claimed the body. He was buried in an unmarked grave. I didn't react. I didn't feel joy or sadness. Just a faint cold wind that reminded me, people like him never change. They simply fall, over and over, into the holes they dig for others. Summer, still serving her sentence, requested a meeting with me through her attorney. I declined. Whatever she wanted to say, it was far too late to matter. And Rachel? Last I heard, she had been transferred to a long-term rehabilitation facility after multiple failed attempts to manipulate other inmates. Her voice was gone, her audience gone with it, and Sherry, still alive, still silent. A once feared matriarch now reduced to a shadow, wheeled through corridors by strangers, clutching pictures of a son who would never come home. My story wasn't theirs anymore. It wasn't even about them. It was about me, the woman who survived, the woman who rose, the woman who now had the final word. And that word was freedom. So I lived fully, fiercely, without shame. I danced again, traveled, took Alex's hand and ran into the ocean with no fear of drowning. I built new memories in the spaces where the old ones had burned. I loved with all the parts of me that once felt shattered. And when people asked me how I did it, how I got through the betrayal, the pain, the loss, I never gave them the full story, because they didn't need it. All they needed to know was this: I stopped waiting to be saved. I saved myself.